an icy wind drags a plastic bag across the cracked asphalt. The smell of wet concrete, burnt rubber, and cheap fast food from the stand across the street. Busted streetlights cast orange splotches on a wall covered in faded graffiti. A six-pointed star, a pitchfork, the letters GD scratched into the brick with a key. You are a foot soldier, the absolute bottom of the pyramid. You're in your early 20s, standing on the corner in a thin jacket, feeling every gust of Chicago wind cut through the fabric. Your job: stand here. Just stand. Watch. Memorize every car, every face, every license plate. You are a living surveillance camera. No salary, no schedule, no right to leave. A crumpled $20 bill in your pocket. That's everything you got for 12 hours in the cold. Your sneakers are soaked. Your fingers are numb. Your phone is dying, but you can't leave to charge it, because if you abandon your post, your own people will deal with you. You didn't choose this life on purpose. You grew up in a neighborhood where the organization was the only structure offering any kind of protection. The school teacher couldn't stop the guys waiting for you after class, but they could. To the shopkeeper across the street, locking his door with 2 deadbolts at the sight of you, you are a threat. Regular residents of the neighborhood cross to the other side when they see a group of guys on the corner. They have no idea you're standing here against your will and that you're just as frozen as they are. Suddenly, a car with tinted windows pulls up to the curb. The driver rolls the window down 2 inches to 5 centimeters. You're handed a duffel bag and an address. Deliver the package 3 blocks away. Don't open it. 2 blocks ahead, a patrol post. Cops stand at that intersection every single evening. If you walk through them carrying this bag and they stop you, you're locked up for years. Nobody from the organization is paying for a lawyer. If you take the long way through the vacant lot and the back alleys, you risk wandering into rival territory. A lone foot soldier on enemy ground is a target. What will you choose? Pause the video and write in the comments, walk through the cops or walk through enemy territory. The foot soldier's status is the absolute bottom of the Gangster Disciples hierarchy. Foot soldiers handled the riskiest work, standing on corners as lookouts, delivering packages, serving as human shields and bargaining chips in territorial conflicts. The organization, founded by Larry Hoover on Chicago's South Side, built its entire pyramid on people like these, expendable material that could be replaced in a single day. A foot soldier didn't earn a steady wage. He got scraps and promises that someday he'd move up Chicago. Barbershop basement detective Jimmy sits in an old barber chair with worn leather, slowly swiveling it side to side. The chrome armrests gleam dully in the light of a single bare bulb. He pulls a beat-up notebook from his trenchcoat pocket and slowly flips through the pages. On his shoulder, a snail in a minicoat and fedora carefully crawls along the back of the chair, studying old photographs pinned to the wall with thumbtacks. You took the long way, Jimmy says, without looking up from his notes. Through the vacant lot, through enemy ground. You made it, but now you've been noticed, and not just by your enemies. Now you are an enforcer. A dark room with a low ceiling. The air smells of bleach and old linoleum. On the table lies a thick notebook filled with names and numbers. The organization's handwritten bookkeeping. Next to it, a stack of cheap burner phones. You got promoted because you didn't break. You got beat up on enemy turf, but you delivered the bag. The organization remembered. Now, you're responsible for making sure the rules inside the gang are followed. You are the internal police. If someone's skimming money, breaking discipline, or talking too much, you handle it. You were given a set of rules. The 16 laws of the Gangster Disciples, printed on a crumpled sheet of paper. Never betray the organization. Never show weakness. Respect the hierarchy. You memorized every single law, because if you forget even one, the punishment will be applied to you. To the barbershop owner upstairs, cutting regular people's hair and hearing the muffled thuds from the basement. You are the reason he can't sleep at night. He knows what happens down there, but he pays rent to the organization, and that's exactly why his shop has never been robbed. The neighborhood sees the paradox. The source of their fear is the very thing protecting them from even greater chaos. One night, an old friend comes to you. He was a foot soldier with you. He says he wants to leave the organization. He got a job at a warehouse, a real paycheck. He asks you to just look the other way. But you know the rules. Leaving the organization without permission is a violation. If leadership finds out you stayed quiet, they'll punish you instead of him. If you turn your friend into leadership, you prove your loyalty forever. But you destroy a man who had your back on the streets. If you stay quiet and let him go, you risk your own position and safety. And if it comes to light, the consequences will be brutal. What will you choose, right? Turn him in or let him go? The enforcer in the Gangster Disciples structure is the person responsible for maintaining internal discipline. The organization functioned as a pseudo-state with its own code of laws, courts, and punishment system. The 16 laws of the GD were not a metaphor. They were a literal charter that every member was required to memorize. An enforcer had no right to personal emotions. If your best friend broke a law, you were required to report it. This system mirrored 20th century totalitarian regimes, where betraying loved ones was considered the highest form of devotion to the system. Chicago, abandoned sports complex. Jimmy stands by a broken basketball backboard, running his finger along the chipped paint. The rim hangs sideways, the net torn away long ago. He bends down, picks up a faded basketball from the floor, and slowly spins it in his hands, studying the cracks in the rubber. The Snail sits on the three-point line, marking, carefully examining dusty sneaker prints on the hardwood. Discipline isn't strength, Jimmy says quietly, letting the ball drop. The ball hits the floor with a hollow thud and rolls into the darkness. Discipline is a cage where you lock the door from the inside. Jimmy adjusts his coat collar and looks straight at you. His gaze is heavy and tired. By the way, if you've made it this far, you're not the type to quit halfway. But YouTube's algorithms work like an organization. If you don't leave a trace, a like, a subscription, a comment, they'll bury this investigation, and you'll never see the next level. So think about it. Done. Then let's go deeper. You are a coordinator, a cramped apartment on the 3rd floor of a housing project. Blinds shut. Blue light from a monitor illuminates a desk cluttered with burner phones, neighborhood maps, and stacks of cash held together with rubber bands. On the wall, a homemade territory chart drawn in marker directly on the wallpaper. Now you run a zone. 4 blocks, your responsibility. You have 5 foot soldiers and 2 enforcers. All the money from your territory passes through your hands. You count every dollar, writing the figures down in a notebook with a ballpoint pen. Your main job, keep the zone running quietly without attracting police attention. Silence is currency. The quieter your territory, the more they trust you from above. But silence costs money. You pay shop owners to stay quiet. You negotiate with locals so they don't call the police. You settle everyday disputes between neighbors faster and harder than any court. To the residents of your 4 blocks, you are the shadow mayor. The old woman from the apartment across the hall brings you a homemade pie. Because after you had a talk with the troublemakers, they stopped making noise at night. The car wash owner on the corner washes your car for free every week. People on the street nod at you, but they never look you in the eye. They're grateful and terrified at the same time. One day, intel comes in. One of your foot soldiers has started working for a rival organization. He's been feeding them information about your routes and schedules. If you pass judgment yourself without going to leadership, you show strength and decisiveness. But if leadership finds out you acted without authorization, they might demote you for overstepping. If you report to the governor and hand the decision upstairs, you show loyalty to the system, but you lose time. The traitor might escape, and the information that leaks could put your entire zone at risk. Choose. Judge him yourself or report to the top. The coordinator in the Gangster Disciples was a mid-level command position, the equivalent of a middle manager in a corporation. Coordinators ran specific territorial zones and were responsible for cash flow, logistics, and keeping order. Larry Hoover's organization deliberately copied corporate structure. He demanded his people keep books, hold meetings, and even write reports. The coordinator was squeezed between the streets and leadership. Too soft, you lose control of the territory. Too hard, you attract police and anger from above. Chicago suburb, mansion behind a high fence. Jimmy stands by a window with blinds, bending one slat with his finger and peering out carefully. Dim light from a street lamp draws stripes across his face. The snail slowly crawls along the windowsill, leaving a silvery trail on the dusty wood, and stops at the edge, listening to the silence beyond the glass. The higher you climb, Jimmy releases the blind slat, and it snaps back into place. The fewer people can tell you the truth, and the more people want to take your spot. You are a governor, a spacious house in a quiet suburb. Leather couch, flat-screen TV, coffee machine in the kitchen. At first glance, a regular house for a regular person. But in the basement behind a locked door stands a metal cabinet with documents, maps, name lists, and several envelopes stuffed with cash. You control an entire region. Beneath you, dozens of coordinators, hundreds of enforcers, and countless foot soldiers. You no longer show up on the streets. Nobody sees you. You pass orders through a chain of intermediaries, and each order goes through 3 pairs of hands before reaching the person who carries it out. You invested the organization's money into legitimate businesses, car washes, laundromats, small construction firms. On paper, you're a successful entrepreneur from the South Side, who pulled himself out of poverty and now helps his community. To your suburban neighbors, you're a pleasant guy who mows his lawn on Saturdays and waves over the fence. They don't know that the phone in your pocket rings every 30 minutes, and every call is a problem that could cost someone their freedom. Your accountant, a pale man with glasses on a lanyard, reconciles 2 sets of books every evening, the clean one and the shadow one, and his hands tremble every time the numbers don't match. Federal agents have you under surveillance. You know it. They're filming your house from a van on the next street. They're writing down the license plates of everyone who visits. One day, one of your coordinators proposes a deal. He's willing to testify against members of a rival organization, outsiders, not your own, in exchange for the police easing up on your territory. He needs your permission to make contact with the feds. If you agree, the police pressure lifts and your business gets room to breathe. But you open a channel between your people and the feds. Today, they're giving up outsiders. Tomorrow, they might give up your own. If you refuse, you preserve the principle of absolute silence, but the police pressure keeps choking your operation. Coordinators will start grumbling that you're sacrificing their freedom for principles. What will you choose? Allow contact with the feds or maintain silence? The governor in the GD structure managed vast territories and controlled financial flows. Larry Hoover, who created the system, demanded his governors launder income through small businesses, charity, and neighborhood investments. This created the paradox of a double life. By day, a governor might sponsor a basketball tournament for the community, and by night, coordinate operations that hundreds of lives depended on. The Federal Bureau of Investigation spent decades trying to crack this dual structure using the RICO Act, which allows prosecuting organization leaders for the actions of their subordinates. Chicago, federal prison, meeting room. Jimmy sits behind a long metal table, arms crossed. Cold white light from the ceiling reflects off the tabletop, scratched by hundreds of hands. A surveillance camera in the corner blinks its red LED. The Snail sits on a stack of legal folders, stamped classified in red, slowly swaying its horns as if listening to the silence of the empty corridor beyond the door. The crown, Jimmy whispers, tapping his finger on the table. Everyone wants to wear it. Nobody stops to think that it weighs enough to snap your spine. You are a board member, the summit of the hierarchy. You run the Gangster Disciples, even from here, from a cell, through encrypted notes, coded words in phone calls with lawyers, and messages passed through chains of trusted contacts. Your cell, 65 square feet, 6 square meters, concrete walls, metal bunk, a sink, and dim light. But beyond these walls, thousands of people follow your orders. Your word moves millions of dollars. Your silence can save a man. Your nod can destroy one. The paradox. You hold absolute power, but you can't walk through the door. You control an empire, but you don't control when they turn on your light. To the federal prosecutor who's been working your case for 15 years, you are the white whale. His obsession. He knows that putting you behind bars didn't destroy the organization. It made you a legend. To the guard who checks your cell every morning, you're a quiet man who politely says hello and never raises his voice. And that calm silence terrifies him more than anything. A lawyer comes to see you in prison. He says the prosecution is offering a deal. You publicly dissolve the organization, call on your people to stand down, and in exchange, you get a sentence review. Maybe in a few years, you walk free. But you know that if you dissolve the organization from the top, thousands of people on the streets will be left without the only structure that gave them any illusion of protection. They'll become vulnerable. And new organizations, more violent and chaotic, will fill the vacuum within weeks. If you accept the deal, you get a shot at freedom, but you betray the people who built this system with you. If you refuse, you stay in this cage for the rest of your life. But you preserve the legend and the structure that survived decades. The final crossroads. Take the deal or stay in the cage. Larry Hoover, chairman of the board of the Gangster Disciples, was sentenced to life in prison and for years managed the organization from behind bars. His attempts to rebrand GD from a street gang to a political movement called Growth and Development sparked a debate: genuine transformation or tactical camouflage. Federal prosecutors insisted on the latter. Hoover tried to present his organization as a community group helping African American neighborhoods, but the court ruled it was a cover for continued criminal activity. This legal precedent became a landmark case in the history of applying the RICO Act to street organizations. Jimmy's Archive. Jimmy pulls open a heavy metal box labeled Evidence on its side. Inside, stacks of yellowed newspaper clippings, street photographs, and folders marked confidential. The Snail is already sitting on the edge of the box, lit by the cold glow of a desk lamp with a green shade. The foot soldiers situation. The sunk cost trap. In behavioral economics, this phenomenon explains why a person keeps investing resources into a clearly losing venture once they've already put in enough. A foot soldier who's been standing on a corner for 3 years doesn't leave because things are good. He doesn't leave because he's already invested 3 years of his life, his reputation, and his connections. Walking away means admitting it was all for nothing. The brain defends itself from this pain by convincing the person that just a little more and the reward will come. This is exactly how any dependency works, from toxic relationships to dead-end jobs. The more you've invested, the harder it is to walk away, even when you can see the door is wide open. Google sunk cost fallacy. Behavioral economics. The enforcer's situation, moral disengagement. Albert Bandura described the mechanism by which a person develops internal justifications for actions they themselves consider immoral. An enforcer punishing a friend for breaking the rules doesn't think I'm hurting someone close to me. He thinks I'm upholding the organization's law. This shift of responsibility from the individual to the system allows people to do things that would terrify them in normal life. Bandura identified 8 mechanisms of moral disengagement, and the most common is diffusion of responsibility. When everyone is doing something wrong, nobody feels personally guilty. Corporations use this exact same mechanism when they spread an unethical decision across a committee, so no single person carries the weight of moral responsibility. Google moral disengagement. Albert Bandura. 8 mechanisms. The coordinator's situation. The illusion of control. A psychological phenomenon described by Ellen Langer, in which a person overestimates their ability to influence events that are actually beyond their control. The coordinator believes he runs his territory. He keeps the books, positions his people at their posts, settles conflicts, but in reality, he controls nothing. Not the behavior of his foot soldiers, not the decisions of leadership, not the actions of the police. Any random factor can shatter his control in a second. Langer proved that the illusion of control gets stronger when a person is given the attributes of power, a title, subordinates, a territory. He starts believing that, since he was given the levers must work. Middle managers at large corporations suffer from this to the same degree. They're given KPIs and a team, but the real decisions are being made 2 floors above them. Google illusion of control. Ellen Langer. Psychology. The governor's situation. Cognitive dissonance. Leon Festinger described the state in which a person simultaneously holds to contradictory beliefs and experiences intense psychological discomfort as a result. A GD governor sponsors basketball courts for the neighborhood while simultaneously coordinating operations that destroy that same neighborhood. To avoid losing his mind, the brain generates rationalizations. I'm helping the community. It would be worse without me. I'm choosing the lesser evil. The deeper the dissonance, the more elaborate the justifications become. Festinger proved that people will sooner change their perception of reality than admit that their actions contradict their values. Politicians, corporate directors, and even ordinary parents deal with this daily. We're all masters at convincing ourselves that our choice was the only right one. Google cognitive dissonance, Leon Festinger theory, the chairman's situation, the prison power paradox. Sociological research reveals a unique phenomenon. Isolating a leader from his organization can paradoxically strengthen his power rather than weaken it. When a leader is in prison, he becomes a symbol, untouchable, mythologized, almost sacred. Direct orders are replaced by interpretations. Subordinates begin acting as the boss would want, projecting his will. This creates an effect where the leader's power on the outside was limited and concrete, but the leader's power in isolation becomes boundless and abstract. Nelson Mandela, Bobby Sands, Antonio Gramsci. History is full of people whose imprisonment turned them into figures far more influential than they ever were while free. Prison doesn't destroy power. It transfers it from the physical dimension to the ideological one. Google prison power paradox, leadership, isolation, sociology.
Author's commentary: The sunk cost trap. You think this is about foot soldiers in Chicago. But think about it. How many years have you been working at a job that brings you neither joy nor growth? You don't leave because it's good. You don't leave because you've already invested so many years, so many sleepless nights, so many missed evenings with the people you love. Your brain says, just a little more, and there'll be a promotion. But the promotion isn't coming. You're standing on the same corner, only now the corner is called the office. Moral disengagement: you're an enforcer. You've fired people on orders from management. You've signed documents that made someone's life worse because that's company policy. You're not a bad person, but you've learned to shift responsibility onto the system, and that's exactly why the system stands. It stands on people who are just doing their job. The illusion of control: if you're a coordinator, if you've got a title, subordinates, and KPIs, you think you're managing, but the real decisions are being made one floor up. You were given the steering wheel of a car that's up on a jack. You've been turning it for hours, wondering why nothing moves. Cognitive dissonance: we're all governors of our own little empires. We say we value family, but we work until midnight. We say we're about healthy living, but we order fast food at 3 a.m, and every single time, our brain instantly generates a justification so convincing that we believe it ourselves. Because admitting the dissonance means admitting you've been lying to yourself, and that's the most painful thing in the world. And the prison power paradox: when you get fired, dumped, or isolated, you'll be surprised to find that people become more interested in you than when you were on. They start projecting, mythologizing, idealizing. You become a symbol. And a symbol can't be fired, dumped, or locked up. Getting out of an organization is nearly impossible. But getting out of your mental cage is a matter of one honest conversation with yourself. Look at your life. What rung of the pyramid are you standing on? Who are you handing your crumpled $20 bills to, standing in the freezing wind? The link to our Discord server is always waiting for you on the main channel page. YouTube doesn't like links in the description. Subscribe, check out the community tab, and make the right choice. This was the Your Life as Channel and Detective Jimmy. See you in the shadows.